Do developers want zoning? One of the first things I need to touch on is the fact that there were a whole bunch of really great patriots who were developers or real estate agents who or just everyday landowners who helped with the growth policy repeal to get rid of the zoning. And the reason why is because they were more interested in property rights than they were in their business interests. But on the left, their biggest argument is that this was all a big developer scheme to get rid of the growth policy. And in fact, that just wasn't true. We went to a lot of the big developers, and they were on the other side. They wanted the zoning. In fact, a lot of the people in the Republican Party at the county level and at the state level are developers or have developer interests. And we found that there was a whole bunch of them, not all of them, but there was a whole bunch of them who really wanted the zoning and were trying to undercut the growth policy repeal. So you might say, well, why would a developer want zoning? Well, it's really simple. It's fascism in its purest form, because the government gets to decide who's successful and who isn't. So if you're in charge of the county commissioners, meaning you're one of the Republican insiders, and so you're really good friends with the county commissioners, then they can zone land a certain way that is beneficial to one developer, and then they can zone land another way which is not beneficial to another developer. And so it's picking the winner. That's one of the examples of fascism, is when the private citizen still has some ownership over the property, but you have to play ball with the government, do it the way they want to do it, be in the old boys club or whatever in order to have your business be successful. Now, this is a Montana law here, and this is part of what's going on today. In fact, our growth policy is currently repealed and we have no zoning, but this section here is subdivision regulation. And we are in the subdivision regulation process where they're going to rewrite it and put in some new stuff, and they want to develop this section right here into the subdivision regulations, and then later on down the road they're going to try and get another growth policy and more zoning in order to facilitate this section. And this is a Montana law. I'm sure you have one similar in your state. You'll just have to go search for it. 76-3-509. Local option cluster development regulations and exemptions authorized. If the governing body has adopted a growth policy that meets the requirements of 76-1-601, the governing body may adopt regulations to promote cluster development and preserve open space under this section. If you go down to 3A and B, it says shorter time frame for review and establish procedures and requirements that provide an incentive for cluster development. And this is pretty typical stuff that you'll hear in fascism. You'll say, well, we should incentivize what we like. But you see, the government isn't supposed to be in the position of picking winners. That's what the free market is for. If people don't want to live in sky-rise condos, then no matter how many developers develop them, it doesn't really matter. They'll go out of business and they'll have to be torn down, and they'll put up ranches. And if the ranches don't work, they'll put up condos. But under this plan here, you can see that as long as you play ball, then, and you have a growth policy, because you have to have one in order to get these incentives and the shorter time frames for review. And see, that's the big expenditure for developers, is going through the review process, because you have to go through the planning department, and then you have to go to the planning board, and both of those organizations are advisory only, and so you follow what they say, and then it goes to the county commissioners who have the power, and they say, well, I know that you got this advice from the planning department, and you did that, and you went to the planning board and you got their advice and you did that, but this is what we want you to do. And so there's this really long process, an expensive process you have to go down. And so here, not only will they possibly give you incentivization, but they'll shorten the time frames, give you a quick through the process. And so the law is set up in a fascist way in order to convince developers to overlook property rights in order to facilitate their business needs. So we're really left with two choices. Generally speaking, on the Democrat side, they're practicing communism, where they would like really for all property to be community property, nobody to really have ownership over it. They like to use the word control a lot. That's pretty interesting. They'll say, well, we need some control. What they'd really like is total control. And on the Republican side, the ones over there who want the zoning, it's all about fascism. They want to benefit from the zoning in a business sense. There's a few of them who might just want to control their neighbor because they don't like the way his yard looks or whatever. But generally, I found on the Republican side, what they're thinking is, well, if we can have the zoning, then if it'll say, for example, I can have 10 houses per acre, then I'll be a really successful businessman, because when I go through the subdivision review process, then I can point to the zoning and say, look, it says I can have 10 houses here. If I can have 10 houses here, you have to give them to me. So a lot of them figured, okay, it'll be a lot easier, cheaper, quicker for me to get through the process. However, they're kind of working together. But you don't see the fascists as much. When I first got involved in the process, I went to a whole bunch of the meetings, and a lot of the Republicans who were up there, they weren't saying they were against zoning. They would say, we want the right to vote on zoning, or not this zoning. But they never said, I'm against zoning because it takes property rights. And so I got kind of suspicious on that. And the other thing that was going on at the time is they were getting signatures on a protest petition, and I'm not going to get into that, but basically this was an untimely petition because it had to happen after the zoning was established, and it needed to be authorized and all these things. They had like 5,000 signatures on a fake petition. And so I realized right away that there was this group out there who were basically just putting on the impression that they were fighting zoning. It was all a ruse.